thank you for joining us for this edition of the 2020 Celebrate Sisterhood Virtual Education Series. For the next hour, you will be motivated, educated, and inspired to be your very best self during this unprecedented pandemic. Our experts will share tips and strategies to help you and your families prosper. Please remember, you are not alone.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Linda Bradley, founder and chairwoman of Celebrate Sisterhood. Welcome to this month's edition of Celebrate Sisterhood 2.0. This is a community outreach and education program that empowers multicultural women to embrace self-care and strive for optimal health for themselves, their families, and their communities. This event is pre-recorded. If you have any questions about the information shared today, please email celebratesisterhood@ccf.org. My guest today is Dr. Ellen Burtz Cooper, Senior Managing Partner of Improve Consulting and Training Group. Today's topic is managing stress during the pandemic, addressing your new normal. This topic is very timely. The pandemic has upended everything we do from work, hobbies, travel, and family life. Today's session will enable you to learn strategies to minimize the impact of the pandemic and address new ways to manage stress. Our guest, Dr. Ellen Burtz Cooper, is a dynamic speaker and teacher and will untangle the nuts and bolts of stress and help us discover the keys to change. Ellen, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley, for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I think we're off to a great start today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun together, and our listeners and participants will be energized by what you have to say. But let's just start with the definition. What is stress?
Yeah, Dr. Bradley's state is that stress is a state of mental or emotional strain, and it's some type of tension, usually resulting from an adverse or demanding circumstance. And we talk about stress in terms of managing it, but we typically don't use the words eliminate. If we can, where possible, great, but typically those emotional strains or tensions, adverse circumstances are coming at us from a number of different directions. And that's what we usually describe it as, something that is usually demanding beyond your normal circumstances.
That's great. And I can see as we move forward how we're going to elaborate on this. So tell me, how does stress affect your work and your home life? Especially as women, we have, two different hats that we wear, work and home. So how does stress affect that?
It affects it in a number of different ways. When you think about it, at home and at work, we have stressors, and some of those are sometimes different. They may be one and the same as well. But when you think about it, we look at what's happening now. A lot of the stress was unplanned, not predicted. And so it came upon us very quickly. I don't know how you felt, but I just looked up one day and was going, what is going on? And the way it impacts us a few ways. There's some people who actually experience physical symptoms associated with it, aches, pain, stiffness, something with the tummy or the stomach, right? Others might have emotional, where they're a little bit more irritable than they are typically. They might feel overwhelmed, or you might see some moodiness. And then others might experience cognitive, or the inability to maybe concentrate, or, where did I put that thing? They maybe not have the memory that they used to, or it could be making poor judgment calls. And then the last is behavioral, right? You might be eating or sleeping differently than your normal pattern of behavior. We see procrastination quite a bit, or nervous habits. I had someone on a call with me the other day who was just eating the whole call, and she said, I eat a lot when I'm nervous, because she was very stressed. So they can be physical, emotional, cognitive, or behavioral. And believe it or not, some of us experience all of those at one time.
Yeah, it's very powerful. It's almost that flight and fright response, and sometimes it's an overdrive with all of the epinephrine and hormones that are released because of the tension that you described.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you actually able to eliminate stress?
Yeah, eliminate, I would say, as we talked about earlier, I would love to. There are some stressors we can eliminate. And I'll give you a funny example. I have a person that I call, and they're just very negative about everything. The pandemic has been horrific for a lot of people, and I get it, but there's been some good that's happened. And so I at least like to concentrate on some of the value that we've extracted from it. But I know it's been very tragic. But their mood and their behavior now is just completely negative on everything. Linda, if I say there's a rainbow out, they'll say it's ugly. They don't like puppies or babies anymore. I mean, it's just a lot. And I've suggested that she talk to someone, but I was not able to continue daily conversations with that person. And so there are some cases where you have control. Yes, you can eliminate that. But it was still weighing on my brain. So for me, I say we don't really eliminate, we learn to manage them, because this is not going away. And so the terminology that I prefer people think about is stress is going to come at us from a number of different angles. Are we able to manage it well and get through it?
Excellent. Those are all good points. So as we look at this pandemic and what's going on, what do you think and what are you seeing among your clients, colleagues, and friends in terms of what's the biggest difference between this pandemic stress and typical workplace stress? Is there a difference? Can you measure it or see it, or what do you feel?
We're seeing it, Linda. We're in about 80 so companies across the U.S. and outside of the U.S. And what we're seeing is the big difference here was this was unplanned. It was not predicted, right? There are some studies that showed, years ago that we could have a pandemic coming, but no one was really watching that. And so it was unplanned, unpredicted, and it was disruptive globally. So those are three major differences, because you think about, we usually plan for quite a bit of stuff. We usually know things are coming, not sure when. Think about recessions, right? We know that there's a cyclical effect to it. But the difference was it felt like for a lot of us out of nowhere. So that is the first thing that made it not our typical stress, that we didn't see this coming. The other difference we're seeing in the workplace is it caused us to have to work in a very different way than we've been accustomed to. We normally, for many of us, go into the office. We get energy from being around people. Even introverts are typically sometimes having to be in situations where they're around others. We were tossed very quickly into very different working environments. And that, to me, the unplanned part of it, the quickness of how it happened, that really rocked a lot of our worlds. And then you think about home. Linda, I don't have kids, but I can't imagine the parent who has to now work from home, and then they've got a baby and a 3-year-old who needs their attention at the same time. So it brought things that we've never had to experience before. I don't know about you, but I've never had a situation where I've been told, stay in the house, right? Don't just go to the normal market when this first started. I don't know a time when I've seen kids not go into schools during the school year. So we had a lot of new things that happened. So those are some of the biggest pieces that I see that are different now.
Yeah, and I think we, as you mentioned, get comfort from others. So everyone has a different spiritual life, mindfulness, things that they might do, and even pulling that away. And I can just look at my mom, who's in her late 80s, and the sense of isolation. So while I relish sometime myself working from home, because I'm always up and about, and one day a week at home has been wonderful, what you just said is so true. The sense of isolation can be devastating. And we are Sisters Keepers, and so it's those who are listening, we've got to check in, even if it's by Zoom, a text, a call, to friends and family, because as Ellen said, it can be very difficult. When you look at stress, as we talked about, it occurs everywhere. But let's get back a little bit to workplace stressors. You said you work with 80 companies. Tell us what they're telling you in terms of actual workplace stressors. What's happening?
Yeah, well, we're seeing it from the companies, but we're also seeing it through research that's been done around stress, where typically in most workplaces, there are usually about 7 core areas of stress. Now, those can be subdivided into a number of different areas, but we usually in the workplace see 7 big factors, and they're around job demand. How many demands are being placed on you at any given time within your role? And that can be huge depending upon the type of job. One of them is effort and reward balance. How much do you feel you're rewarded or compensated for the amount of energy and work you put in? And it's interesting, I had someone the other day tell me they have a very demanding job. It is a high risk job. Their mistakes are very costly in the medical field. And she said to me, I said, it's the job demand causing you the stress. She said, no, because it balances out with my effort reward. I am compensated very heavily for this job, and I love it and I take it seriously. So you can have stress factors that balance out. But as I walk through them, job demand, effort and reward balance, control. How much control you have has a lot to do with stressors. When people feel as though they're not having any type of input into their role, the processes that they oversee, organizational change. And even though we're talking in the workplace, I would say environmental and global change, like we've seen with the pandemic. So types of changes, especially again, unpredicted. Manager, supervisor, the person you report to or the people you report to have a direct impact on the level of stress that you experience in the workplace. And the last 2 are social support. It goes back to when you talk about the isolation and not having the social supports in place to be able to have conversations and check in on people to see how they're doing. And the last one is job security. How secure am I in this job? So if you look at those, and I'll just rattle them off very quickly: job demands, effort, reward, control, change that's happening, your manager, supervisor, whether I have social supports in place, and job security, you can see very quickly how this is one of the first times we've seen all 7 at play at one time. That's also what makes this very different. Usually it's 1 or 2, but when you have all 7, those numbers go up pretty high.
As you look at that equation of 7 numbers, what would you say the top 3 are that we as those of us who are working really need to be mindful, and which one of those might lead us to having more problems? So you listed 7. Thank you for summarizing, but let's kind of maybe drill down on 3. What would be the takeaways for people to really be mindful of which 3, do you think?
If I look at the 3, and Linda, these 3 would have been very different a few months ago, right?
Okay.
But if I look at the 3 right now, for many people, it's job security. Will I still have a job if we're not selling as much product as we used to? And for others, that's not mattering as much because they're selling more as a result of this.
Okay.
But job security, social support, I need people around me. And the other one is the amount of change that's happening. So change, security in terms of job, and whether I have social supports in place.
So how do you advise your clients or your best friend along these 7 dynamics?
Yeah, for each of those, there's tons of strategies out there that we work with them on a customized level. But if I had to just think about a few overall that are almost universal strategies that help manage stress, it's really helping people to be flexible and adapt or bend to changes that are happening. When we stand stiff and we're not flexing, it's going to cause a toll on us physically and mentally. So teaching people how to be flexible, adapt to the new conditions.
How do they do that? How do they do that?
Yeah. The flexibility, one is having the conversation around it. We've got to talk about this. First, Linda, you've got to tell me what is going on with you. How are you feeling about it? And then we get to kind of the root of it. What's causing this? And for some people, it's very different. Well, Ellen, I don't want to flex because I always do my work in person. And I found that when we got to the root of it, it was because I'm uncomfortable on video. I said, okay, we can teach you how to do the video. And so the person was not willing to flex, and I saw her stress go up. As her job demanded her do more of that, we examined really what's going on. Is it really the video, or is it that you don't get to engage in between on breaks? And she goes, I think it's that I'm missing the people. I said, so it's not really the video. So what we did was make sure on breaks, we have separate breaks where we have structured and she could engage with people a little bit more. So we engineered in more social time. So really it's having people be honest and vulnerable enough to talk about what's happening. And when you can talk about it, we can get to the root of what's causing it. And only then can we help you come up with strategies to do that. But the flexibility and adapting rather than resisting it, it's a big deal. It's a big part of it.
And could you give us an example for the other two that you mentioned?
Yeah, so when you think about adapting, I'll even poke at myself a little bit. Okay. I'm on the road I go to 30 cities a year, 32 cities a year. So I'm on a plane every other week, sometimes weekly. And when I found out, wait, I have 26 trips planned already. You can't cancel my trips. So I was fighting it. Linda, you should see these emails. I have one in February that said, for sure we'll be back in March. I have one email in March that said, absolutely in April. I have one in April that says, oh, for sure, you'll see me in person in June. And I thought, okay, Ellen, just stop writing these emails. And what I ended up doing, an example would be, do a little research. Okay, I'm uncomfortable with this. What would make me more comfortable? I got you're on a huge monitor right now in my office. I got a much larger monitor so I can see what was going on. I have a separate one for my notes, right? I plan and pace in between each meetings. So I was able to be more adaptive because I looked at the resources I needed to feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So we can get people to say, here's why I'm uncomfortable. Okay, then what would make you more comfortable? And we could put those things in place. And I'll give you one more of being creative. There are a number of people with children at home who didn't expect to have that. And they said, Ellen, school ended. I don't have anything for them to do during the workday. And what I said was, we're always seeking diversity. And the one lady called me, she was so upset. She says, I'm embarrassed. My kids are in the background. They're making noise, Ellen, I can't concentrate. I said, let's be creative, right? Because that's one of the pieces, flexible, adaptable, creative. I said, let's give them something to do. And so I had these brain teasers that I use, and I said, put them up on the screen, take a picture, and then have them figure them out. If you can figure these brain teasers out for mommy and this lady on this call by the end of the call, there'll be a prize for you. Do you know we didn't hear a peep out of those kids for the whole time that they were doing that? And so we just had to think of creative ways to deal with the situation you're in rather than fighting that situation.
Yeah, that's a very novel idea. So that sounds great. That sounds great. While we're talking about family and work and now family, tell us what are other stresses that families are seeing at this time vis-a-vis the pandemic? And how are your clients, what are they sharing?
They're being very vulnerable these days. I have never seen this level of transparency as much as I'm seeing now. At the beginning, people wouldn't talk about it. The more, as we mentioned, they talk about it, the more we can help solve for what's going on. I'm seeing them talk more about the issues. One of them is sticking to a routine. They said, Ellen, my routine was thrown out of order. I can't start at 8 like I used to. Sometimes I start at 9:30. So the being out of routine. So we're trying to get people back to some routine, but it won't be the same one you had before, but accepting of a new routine. Dedicated workspaces. We're working all over the house. Wherever my computer is, I'm working. It's too much. And so they were getting burned out because wherever the computer goes with them, the laptop, they were doing work. So having dedicated workspaces, when I'm here, I'm working. And that works for some, maybe not others, but having dedicated spaces for multiple people in the house who are working. Two other ones we've seen are setting boundaries and visual cues to minimize interruption. When you have more people in the house than you thought, because you have kids home from college and out of school, and you might have a partner, spouse, significant other in the house, how do we have boundaries? And so we've actually worked with people to set up their households where this is my space. And even, so much as if you have the means to purchase, actual partitions to minimize sound. And I'll even tell you, my husband and I have visual cues to minimize interruption. I had to give him one earlier today when I'm looking at him and I tell him when you see a suit jacket on, you absolutely cannot interrupt me. A suit jacket, no interruptions. Okay. Now I might have on shorts down below, but a suit jacket. Right. And then when he comes up, can you see my hand and what I'm doing now? Nope, no. But he can. I'm giving him the clear stop sign. I am talking to Linda right now. I cannot do it. And so and then when I do sort of this measure, I have a more casual meeting. You can come on in because there may be things we need to answer. So we're working with people on visual cues. It sounds simple, but when you go from everyone working outside the house to 8 people in the house or 4 working, you've got to have that. And the last one is make time for breaks. And for some families, we do the breaks all at the same time where possible. Others, let's break at different times because we need a break from each other as well. So those are the few things that are happening within the household because most of this is concentrated in the house because we're trying to minimize how much we're going outside.
Excellent. You know, and we often on our Celebrate Sisterhood, our viewers are probably mostly women, but let's also look at men. There are a few men that sign in and watch the program. And also as women, we're working with our partners or husbands. Do you see the stresses with all of your clients? Is there a difference between men and women? And if so, what are they as you are putting all of this together?
We don't have validated data at this point because it's too soon, but we are seeing some trends where if the primary caregiver of the household is typically the one home, we're seeing much higher levels of stress with having to manage the household in a different manner. That's typically happening more with our female clients because they just happen to have been the caregivers. If the caregiver happens to be the male, you're seeing it there. But typically our females as the caregiver in the household. We're also seeing high levels of stress among our more senior level clients who happen to be mainly male. If you look at the makeup of corporate America and you see more from a traditional gender base, you see more males in the executive levels because they're having to make some of the decisions about furloughs, layoffs. They're seeing it all. And they're seeing it all very quickly, and they're having to make decisions that impact households. Should I bring them back into work? How soon? What if I bring them back in and we have another case that happens? Am I going to have to lay off 240 people who won't have jobs, and I know their partner or spouse is not working? So from the household perspective, we're seeing more of our female stress with dealing with the household who happen to work there. And from a male perspective, our corporate senior level clients, we're seeing the people who are making the really big, life-changing, impactful decisions are experiencing high levels of stress there.
Okay, excellent. Is there a way to measure stress levels in the workplace in terms of when you're seeing things? So how do you measure it as a consultant? And then also to follow up, sort of what are the ranges of stress that you're actually seeing?
You are able to measure them, and it's not our work, so we went to the experts. So we have a validated D&I tool that we use, and it's a stress tool as well. And that tool looks at those 7 areas I mentioned before, and they give you a rating in each of those 7 areas. And it's assessment that you can take individually, and it measures the impact in the 7 areas. So you're answering a survey, and they validate it across literally hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people who've taken this over the years. And the ranges in the 7 areas based on how you're answering the questions go from little or no stress, meaning, I didn't notice any stress with that, no big deal. Limited, meaning it stressed me, but hey, it didn't impact my daily work. So yeah, the thought occurred to me, but I was able to keep working and write that email. Elevated, it's noticeable, but you can recover. I had an elevated the other day. I will tell you, I heard something from a client and I could just feel my stress going up, the tightness in the neck and the shoulder areas. It was noticeable because the person on the call said, "Are you okay?" But I was able to recover. So that's elevated. Then there's significant. There's usually a major impact to outcomes. I had someone forget to submit a grant document the other day by the deadline. They won't receive funding for 2021. So that means the stress was so high, it impacted an outcome. And the last area I would say is severe. This is where you may need to seek clinical resources because you're typically experiencing physical symptoms that are starting to happen as a result of the stress. We're seeing hair loss in some people. We're seeing, stomach issues beyond their normal routine that they typically would have. We're seeing a number of different physical reactions. We're also looking at the combination of people who are sitting longer time at computer terminals because we're now sitting doing more work at home. We're seeing the physical signs of stress being more in the neck and the shoulder areas and some parts of the back. So they range from limited to elevated to even severe ranges, and we can measure that through our instrument.
Yeah, excellent. I might just add a little bit here as a physician, as an OBGYN, with obviously female patients. I would totally agree. We're seeing lots of women with hair loss. Usually it's 2% of a chief complaint. Now we're up to 15 to 25%. A lot more prescriptions for medicines or requests for insomnia, sleep aids. And I would just emphasize, as Ellen has mentioned, if you're having trouble sleeping, speak with a physician. Alcohol use. In the state of Ohio, alcohol sales have gone up by 30%. And so, again, these are things to monitor for. Violence in the home against children, against spouses. That's something else that we can see. So I think I really value what you're saying about what's happening in the workplace, but certainly what patients also bring to us as physicians, and many more things. And again, it gets into that stress. We talked about college, with the college 15 pounds from freshman year. Now it's called, jokingly, the COVID 30. You talked about being stuck.
Wait, it's 30?
30 pounds.
Oh,
yes, no. Yes. So we have to get out and move about. So that's important. So I'm just sort of blending what you're saying, and I wanted to just add a few anecdotes about clinically in our practice. And there's also more that I may mention a little bit later. So I do thank you for what these things are that you're seeing in the workplace. Let's pivot for just a minute. You mentioned 7 stress factors that affect our productivity levels in the workplace. Is there anything similar like that for home life?
In the workplace, we're seeing the 7 stressors you mentioned, but at home, we're also seeing a number of stressors, and those stressors come from a few different areas. They still come from work or the ability to earn income to take care of the family. So there's an economic sort of stressor there. There's also a wellness stressor in terms of my overall health condition. I didn't know we were up to COVID 30. I thought it was just 15, so I'm getting nervous here. And you think about the alcohol usage. So we're seeing people's body responding differently and not as robust as they had before. So you're seeing a stressor around the health and wellness. We're also seeing family dynamic interactions. We maybe come home from college, or students come home twice a year. Now they're there and they're adults in the household. So they've been used to running their show a bit. And now you're back under the rules of the parents. So we're seeing some family dynamic stressors. And with relationships, partners, spouses, husband, wives, what we're seeing now is we're spending more time together. And that takes a different level of patience than we've had to have before. We usually might leave out at the house at the same time in the morning, or one stays at home. We're not together all day like we're being now. And so we're seeing really different changes in how we've had to be patient and be more empathetic to what's going on. So we're seeing economic stressors, we're seeing family dynamics, partner dynamic stresses as well. And then the last piece is the isolation you mentioned, just not being able to have other outlets in terms of, we can ride our bikes and those are great, and getting out walking, but being able to, for some people, the positivity of touch, a hug, being able to, have some closeness in some of the conversations they're having, being around people. We're seeing a lot of stress related to social isolation.
Yeah, and our facial expressions, our smiles, our grimaces. With the mask, it's very, very different. I think being expressive with your eyes, or looking up, or wide-eyed, I think it's just very, very different. So I do think that these are things that we're all seeing. So we've mentioned a lot about stress, and it's good to identify each of those. But let's pivot a little bit now and look about managing stress. The first place is in the workplace setting. if you can give some more concrete ideas about some novel ways to manage stress in the workplace.
Yeah, when you look at the workplace, what we like to do is there's some universal things around stress management, looking at our workload, making sure we're prioritizing projects so we're not putting too much on people, making sure managers have the right tools and resources. So there are universal things in the workplace. But what we really like to do is find out from those factors which one's having that biggest toll on the person and adjusting there. So if it's job demands, what we've done is really a nice job of making sure that people have a prioritized list of projects and they understand which ones may have to adjust their timelines on. They may have to take a more creative approach as to how they solve some of these problems as well. We're doing a number of creativity sessions so that people can come up with new and innovative ways to address some of the same issues in the workplace. And instead of travel, you can imagine, and some of the outings that we used to have, people are coming up with really interesting scavenger hunts online, and they have the social hours online, fun things that they're doing for each other to reduce the impact of the demand of the job. Effort reward, when we look at those, we're actually doing quite a bit of work of looking at pay equity. It was a good chance for us to step back and say, are we really rewarding people for what they're doing at work? In terms of organizational change, we're watching for fatigue. While we have a global change going on, do we really need to take on this next project? So we're watching how much organizational change we do. And then for social support, I'm seeing organizations, again, come up with creative ways for people to connect via video and have outings. The other day, I had someone who was in a tough mood and she was having a tough time. And I had a meeting for her at lunch, and I had lunch delivered for her, and her doorbell rang just as our call started. So it was a great time for her. So things like that really help with the workplace. So those are targeted to actual organizational management of stress.
That was just a novel idea for having the lunch delivered. So I applaud you for that, and I'm sure she really, really loved that. That's awesome. And she didn't have to do dishes, so that'll also take away some stress. So
right.
I love these ideas for the workplace. With so many of us having families and significant others, I'd like to hear some novel things about managing stress in your personal life. And I'm really going to listen to this one. Tell me more.
And I know you can add to this one as well, because a lot of your work deals with this. But with the home, what we've looked at now is really the focus around 4 big areas. It's giving you ideas for sleep. So having a sleep strategy now for people, not just tips and tools for sleep, but let's create a sleep strategy for you. When do you start? When's the best time? Let's monitor what that looks like. And some people have to seek out other clinical resources like professionals like yourself or others. But most of us can develop a pretty robust plan just by monitoring and evaluating our sleep from day to day. So we're putting strategies in place. Is music better for you? Putting on, your blue light glasses if you're going to be on that computer within 2 hours of bedtime. Do you need a tea that helps you? So maybe taking a walk is better for you 3 hours before bed. So we're actually creating strategies for people. And the other piece, the big 4 areas, one is nutrition. With that one, we're taking a pretty simple approach, 3 things. You either eliminate something, substitute, or add. So I'll pick on myself. I added more of my green smoothies in. Love those, right? I substituted my regular chips for baked ones.
Okay.
Oh, that was a hard one. But now I'm not noticing and missing the other ones. It took a while, but I'm not. And then elimination. There were a few things that I was eating that, let's get rid of those. So I eliminated a few of those. One of the other areas that we're working with at home is movement and stretching. So there are people who say, I don't want to do exercise. I would love for them to, but if they don't, at minimum, we're asking that you do some stretching, especially at your computer area. So I know when I'm teaching, about every 40 minutes, if I teach a day-long class or a half day, I have people stop and we do some very thoughtful stretches just to relieve a little tension from us physically. For that one, we're actually giving people a cue. What we're noticing is they love the stretching. Once they do it, they forget to do it. So with that one, we need a reminder. So we tie it to something. Every time you drink a glass of water, right? You don't forget to do that, stretch. When you task switch, if you go from email to phone, that's a reminder. Oh, put in my, stretch here or do something. When you take a bio break or what have you. So with movement, we're having people tie it to a cue because the biggest issue was forgetfulness on that one. And the last one is mindfulness. With everything going on, I don't know about you, but my mind felt like this. I was watching the news and I was listening to all these people. That's how I felt my mind was going. And so we're working with people now on being mindful and prioritizing that moment. And so there's a lot of self-talk, right? We're watching on a video now, but you hear the news on in the background. Nope. Right now, this is my priority, and I'm going to put my energy into here. That, believe it or not, sleep, nutrition, movement, mindfulness has been the toughest one. And I don't know if that's what you're seeing, but people said their ability to change what they're eating. They love the elimination substitution rule. They like the strategy for sleep. They love the cue for movement. Oh, I remember now. The hardest one we're seeing is staying present in the moment because there's so much going on.
Yeah, those are such key wellness resiliency factors. I think that each of us can really hone in. And for me, just listening, my takeaway for that, I like the idea of tying it to a bio break, do a stretch, phone to email. That's just really, really practical, Ellen. Do you have a favorite resiliency factor for yourself? I know you're a person on the go, all the travel, calls. What's your personal, if we could look in your life a little bit, tell us something a little bit personal about how you're managing this.
Yeah, you're looking at one behind me now, my plants. I love plants and I take care of them, I water, and I have a garden now, which I've always had a small garden, and going out and being able to, eat from the things that you've planted, those are really great stress busters for me. Seeing the greenery in the house, those are great. Another one for me is I've actually eliminated, I would say reduced the amount of media that I was allowing to come in. I was at the beginning trying to keep up with everything like everyone was. I wanted to make sure I was in the know on all of this. What does this website say? What does this say? Let me watch. So I actually had a stress buster of eliminating and picking a few thoughtful sources. I picked multiple sources to look at my data and get my information. It was overload. Another one was really around the people that I choose to be with. I can't be with you physically, but being able to call you up and just say, I just want to say hello and hear your voice. So having people be around me, even if that's by phone or video. And I would say my last one is writing. I write cards to people that I want to have them show up in the mail, because we're not used to getting mail, but everybody's at home now. And so I take on Sundays and I sit and I write 2 or 3 cards to people each Sunday. And I just write something I remember about them, a funny joke we had, and the phone rings just about every Monday, or whenever I send them out, they'll say, Ellen, I got the card. That was so cool. And now they start to do it. So those are a few things that they're simple, but I tell you, they're effective. And the last piece I'll say, with the more simple they are, the more likely we are to sustain them, right? We get a little too fancy. I was going to go running every day and doing all this. I couldn't sustain that. I picked the things that I knew I could sustain.
Right. So let me ask you, are your drawers, house, and everything perfectly clean and tidy now? Did you find, I had to ask you that. We were talking by phone. So how are we doing?
Question, please.
Next question. Yeah, and what I would say for myself, I look back, we started this in March, and I just knew that this was going on. And in my mind, I said, oh my God, I will have the elimination of all of the extra stuff. And that I've not been able to do. So That's been interesting. And if I could share something just personal for myself,
Sure.
as we talked by phone the other day, you know, I love cooking, and I've put together some novel recipes. With my mask, I've managed to go to many ethnic grocers to get the spices. So for me, it's been like a worldwide travel. I, like you, used to travel the world, so I'm finding all of our ethnic grocers in Cleveland and making time with a mask, of course, and doing all the things to stay healthy. But that's been fun. And then lastly for me has been biking. We bought a bike this summer. Almost 1,000 miles I've put on my bike since June. So I'm really proud of that in terms of health, wellness, and as you described, movement. So that's been my personal story and journey. And then lastly, just looking at nature and seeing the spring and seeing the summer, and this weekend biking throughout the metro parks of Cleveland and just seeing the beautiful fall foliage. I don't think I've ever seen this because we're always on the phone, always tied in and engaged with others. So this has been extremely helpful. So yeah, I think that those are some helpful tips that you've shared, and I hope that mine will be helpful also.
And yours have been helpful, I will say, because I know you're known for your cooking, and I actually, you won't believe this. I'm going to tell you, no one's going to believe it, but I actually cook now.
Oh my!
I still had the paper in my oven. I turned the oven on. I said, "What's that smell?" And I hadn't taken the paper. And this is not a new house, right? I just don't cook, right? Or I use an air fryer or something. And we would eat. We're on the go, so we would eat out. We could still eat, fairly healthy salads or things out. I actually started cooking. I do at least 2 meals a day. And my husband, we've been married a number of years. He just looked at me and his eyes were this big. He goes, "You know how to cook?" And I was like, yeah, I was going to mention that about 17 years ago, but I didn't want to start a trend.
Right.
And he was like, "I knew you could cook," right? And I actually will tell you, I enjoy it.
Yeah,
I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, and listening to music. So next time I'll have to do a personal invitation once the pandemic has eased a little bit. When you come back to Cleveland, we'll cook for each other and have a personal buffet. So that's awesome. I've asked you lots of questions today, Ellen. I just want to leave a little bit of time for you to elaborate on anything that I might not have asked and things that might be percolating in your thoughts to tell us more. What else do you think we need to think about or know?
We've hit a lot of them, but if I had to pick on a few things, I would say just forming new habits, using this time to really form new healthy habits. So I would reach for the unhealthy snack. Maybe I reach for the healthier smoothie, or I go take a walk. But I would challenge ourselves to say, when we come out of this, look back and say, what new healthy habits did I develop? That would be one. The other is what I call reframing, positive reframing. I hear people say sometimes, I have to go do this. I would rather you say, I have an opportunity to, right? My friend said, oh, I have to go tutor my son in math now because he can't go to his tutor. I said, look at it as this. You have an opportunity to spend some time with your son on a subject that you know well, or I'm bored. I'd rather you say, I now have time to pursue a new hobby or interest, right? Oh, I'm tired of my family. Reframe that to, I'm glad I have this renewed time before going off. So I would say, developing positive habits, reframing, looking at your self-care, and looking at your health as an investment, not an expense. We tend to look at it as more, and it is, but it's an investment into my health. And the last piece, I would say, the self-care. Some of us have a little bit more time on our hands, others may not. But self-care, I heard a quote, and it was a blogger who mentioned, self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. Giving the world what's best of you instead of what's left. So if we don't do self-care, we'll just get kind of what's left over. And that's not fair to our family and friends. So I would just encourage people, healthy habits, self-care, and reframing how you look at this, what's happening to us across the world.
You have just given us such wisdom today. And I too, if I had one last thing to say also before we close, your health is wealth. and I look at all the things that you do to help companies make money, keep their money, and survive. But everything that you've told us today about stress really comes back to the fact that health is wealth, and you've given us a lot of information. So I really want to thank you, Dr. Ellen Burtz Cooper, for sharing your time and expertise with us. I want to thank you for explaining how stress affects our lives and health. More importantly, thank you for providing helpful stressful management tips that will bring us back to a state of equilibrium so that we can function in an optimal range of health and wellness. I've written down a few tips, and I'm sure our viewers have also. So thank you again, Ellen.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our viewers for joining us for this program. We hope that you've enjoyed today's session. A copy of this session, along with all of our archived events, will be available on our website, clevelandclinic.org/Celebrate Sisterhood. Just a reminder, this event was pre-recorded. If you have any questions about the information shared today, please email celebratesisterhood@ccf.org. Also, mark your calendars and inform your friends of our next virtual session that will be on Thursday, November 19th. Our Cleveland Clinic expert will be Dr. Teresa Dews, and the topic will be Pandemic Impact, Lessons Learned, and Actions to Take. Visit clevelandclinic.org/Celebrate Sisterhood to register. Remember, we're all in this together and here to help you. If you need to make an appointment with a Cleveland Clinic provider, please call 866-320-4573 or visit clevelandclinic.org/APPTS. Please stay healthy, stay safe, wash your hands frequently, and wear a mask.